thank you for joining us on Charting the Way Forward, where we deliver research-informed strategy and intelligence from across the Democratic coalition. This podcast is produced by Way to Win. I'm your host, Kerry Eleveld, and today I'm joined by... That's your cue, Tory. Jump in.
Tory Gavito, president and co-founder of Way to Win. And I guess we could keep that all in. People could just see me surprised.
We'll keep it in. I think it's fine. We just need to go in order of awesomeness. It's Kerry first, and then it's Tory, and then it's me. Dan Ancona, I contract with Way to Win on media research and everything. Immigration.
I'm holding Tory as the most awesome. The only reason I get to speak first is because I'm the host. So, but anyways, we're jumping in. We're jumping in. Last week, Jennifer, Dan, and Christian pieced together a very timely reaction to Republicans' legislative atrocity, which I have just been in my mind calling the Big Ugly and nothing more than the Big Ugly. But this is where, they passed something in which they are punishing the poorest among us, economically crippling the country in order to pad the pockets of the already ungodly wealthy. But that's not all that they did with this bill. And, they are funneling some $200 billion into creating what is arguably the most secretive, malign, and massive law enforcement agency the country has ever seen. And that money will flow to the fingertips of Kristi Noem and the Department of Homeland Security to implement a sprawling expansion of Trump's masked secret police force, otherwise known as ICE, making it the highest.
And maybe
What'd you
some
say?
new alligators. And
maybe new. I don't know about you guys. Every time I see Kristi Noem, I just wish there was a safe word I could say and just she would be gone. Like it's just like. But anyways, ICE will be the highest funded federal law enforcement agency in history, with more money per year than the budgets of the FBI, DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals, and the Bureau of Prisons combined. I mean, it's kind of wild. So we wanted to dig a little further into this somewhat undercovered aspect of the Big Ugly and talk about how we got here and what our research tells us about the path forward. Obviously there's been a lot of information and focus on the Medicaid cuts, but, I just have to start. This question came up. I was listening to the Bulwark, I think the Next Level, and JVL asked the question, is it possible that while the Medicaid cuts, have really dominated coverage and, as far as we're concerned, will obviously have devastating impacts on people across the country, that the gargantuan expansion of ICE and Trump's masked secret police force could prove to be more systemically consequential to the trajectory of the country, of the republic? I mean, just to start off with something light.
Dan, were you going to jump in?
It's just such a heavy topic. Yeah, and Kerry, thank you for this setup. This is so we just posted a thread yesterday because there was a fantastic discussion between Greg Sargent and Simon Rosenberg, two of the smartest people working in Democratic politics and media right now, on I guess it was Monday or Tuesday this week, and they were talking about about immigration and this issue and all of this, and I super strongly recommend that one. Don't stop listening to us, just go find that one after. And in this thread, we just sort of went back and went back through a little bit of just touched on some of our research. I'm just going to recapitulate a little bit of that here, just a tiny bit. We started in March of 2024 last year, 2024. Sometimes I get those years wrong. And we're starting to look at some of the research, and this was from one of the first decks that we did. So I'm going to do a little Steve Kornacki. I've gotten approval to do a little Steve Kornacki style here. And I have khakis. I don't have a cool 3D thing that I can walk around in front of.
Right. Just so people realize, for our listeners now, Dan has a graph up on the on the screen. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you get the benefit, but Dan's just going to talk us through what's on
I'll
there.
explain it enough that hopefully, right? But yeah, you can go check it on YouTube if you want to. And we will do it. I'll include these in the thread too, and we put it up on Blue Sky. So this slide had two things about it. First of all, it's just about the media landscape. Fox News went from talking about the border. So this is like beginning of 2024, or sort of end of 20 or middle of 23 to beginning of 24. That's what the chart shows. And Fox goes from talking about immigration 1,400 times. They always talk about it a lot, right? They talked about it a lot, 1,400 times in July, to 9,200 times in February, and then 9,600 times in March. So it was almost like it became when we've seen caravans, it's all this thing, like there's always something that happens right before the election, in the election year, where all of a sudden immigration becomes a huge story. And if you look at the chart then of public opinion, which is sort of the most urgent issue, people will say economy, which is, this is just sort of as, it's funny that this happened just as people's concerns over inflation and over prices were just starting to come down. All of a sudden, there was a new thing to be worried about, and it's almost like that NPC chip meme, right? Where it's like there's, we go from being concerned about prices to, the new worry is immigration, right? And you can see the overall graph; it goes up from less than 10% to almost 30%. Democrats, it stays low. Independents, it goes up a little. With Republicans, it goes from 10% to more than 50%. It becomes the top thing that Republicans are more concerned about, more than prices, more than anything at all. And it's just that drove the whole narrative, and that was the setup for this being a huge issue. So we were tracking this early on. So since we knew this was happening, we have tons of, I don't know if we'll publish these slides, the whole decks. I don't think we will. But if anybody's listening and ever wants to like get into this, let me know, and I will send you all the rest of our data on this. We saw this happening, and we were working with local groups on the ground, and an organization called Gutsy Media that they're Hollywood based. The woman who runs it, Julie, is amazing, and they do amazing work. They did this beautiful ad, and we were going to play this right here. And I think the audio works really well in this too, but you can watch it on YouTube for people who want it. Okay, I'm going to have to take that one off. Okay. And this ad is called Alondra.
I am from the south side of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. I'm a second grade bilingual teacher. I was brought to the United States when I was just 2 years old. We, the people, fought for DACA, and now we have a better life. We grew up here. This is our home. Trump attacks Latinos. I definitely feel safer with Harris. Trump wants to control our future. Kamala Harris wants to ensure people have the freedom to thrive.
So this was not an overwhelmingly complicated ad, beautifully produced, like a beautiful script and story, but it was nothing, sort of over, like this fit. We were trying to design these messages that would fit in with what Democrats generally believe on immigration. And we hoped that this would start a discussion amongst Democrats about other ways that they could approach the immigration issue, because what they ended up going with, we know now from our top TV Congress research, that they spent almost nothing on it. There was a $4 million ad, which sounds like a lot of money, and it's actually nothing in the 900 whatever 1.8 billion or whatever that they spent. But
you're talking about the Harris campaign's
this is the Harris
presidential
campaign,
spend.
right? Like the Harris spent, almost nothing on one ad that was called Tougher, which you can guess what the message of that was. And then they spent another $4 million on some Spanish language ads, only Spanish language, that were designed clearly Latino ads, right? That were pretty balanced and had a message not too actually that different from what we just heard. But again, that's a tiny spend. And again, that was Spanish language only. There was so 70% of Latino households are English dominant or something like that, and they just missed that whole. They didn't even bother trying to communicate with those people except through the rest of their ad campaign. And then on the Senate side, the screen cap that we've been using is from Sherrod Brown, and this was sort of the median message that they came up with was Sherrod Brown supports the most conservative the most conservative border bill in decades, right? So the message there was our opponents are right to you should be concerned about this. It was just total capitulation on the issue. There was nothing about that. Now, their argument was that, all these Democrat decisions are always based on we need Republican votes, which maybe is true, right? But there's this second presupposition that is the only way to get those votes is by sounding like a Republican, right? Which, we have data from this ad and from another ad that, I don't know, should I play it? Should I play Playbook?
I'm not sure. I tell you what, I think we should finish out this thought, which is, which is both like I just want to like try to bring this home, and then I'll let you go on. But like, I'm gonna let you talk. But just that at the presidential level, there was also almost nothing spent on this. And at the Senate level, there was something spent on this, but it was spent sort of parroting the GOP talking points and seeding what the longtime Democratic position that there should be a pathway to citizenship, and there should be a process in place, and yes, some enforcement mechanisms and whatever. But that was just fell out of the conversation almost entirely. So anyway, I mean that basically we ceded the entire ground. The Democrats ceded the entire ground to Republicans on this, and if anything, just parroted their talking points or tried to play on their terms that they had set.
Right. So we did another ad later in the cycle, which I think we'll post it. It's been on my Blue Sky since the election, since I've been so frustrated about it. It's my pinned post. It was along these similar themes. It was like, look, this is like what Trump is proposing is horrible, right? So I've been getting in fights on the internet about this stuff for the past couple of days after posting a thread about it, and people are saying, "Oh, well, we couldn't change what Stephen Miller was going to do, but we can change public opinion." And if with the amount of money that these campaigns spent, if all they heard from Democrats was that yes, immigration is a big problem, and yes, conservatives are right, there was no alternative. And we know when we go talk to people, I mean, this is sort of the last Kornacki bit that I'm going to do here is from our recent immigration polling that we did. This is just this year, but these numbers haven't changed. The one that jumps out at me is conducting immigration raids at schools, which they are doing now and talking about doing, and actually doing in some places, is at minus 40. It's at minus 50 with independents. It's at minus 48 with overall with all people of color. So it's in this sample was mostly Black and brown voters, and all these things are like massively, horribly unpopular. Revoking visas, like all things that they're separating parents and children, all these things that the Trump administration is there's tons of unpopular stuff here. Democrats could have picked those and run on them, and that was the huge missed opportunity. And this, again, we'll put the slide up, on the thread, but it just shows a bunch of very, very unpopular things that Republicans, that MAGA Republicans now are actually doing.
Right. Just to be clear, at least 2/3 to 3/4 of voters opposed detaining people solely on the suspicion they might be undocumented, conducting immigration raids at schools, revoking visas and green cards, family separation, and sending U.S. Citizens to foreign prisons, which Trump clearly has his eye on now. So those are all like just enormously unpopular, wildly unpopular things. This brings me to a question that I'm not even sure I had in the script, but Tory, how do we get to a place where Republicans pass something that is so wildly unpopular, that they pass a bill that on all levels is so wildly unpopular?
It's like one of your big questions. Just answer it in 3 words.
In 3 words. Totally.
It's my favorite trick. It's my favorite trick.
I know. I just two things come to mind that I'm going to try to do very quickly. One is to say out loud that I'm recording today from Central Texas, where we spent the last week of our holiday week off, totally rained out. And I'm incredibly lucky that all I can say about my holiday was it was rained out, when there are hundreds and hundreds of Texans who have been directly impacted by the floods in Kerrville and in Central Texas.
and thousands more that have 1 to 2 to 3 degrees of separation from the devastation. And it's a little bit in context, right, Kerry? Like your question about how do they get away with this over and over and over again? It is so clear they don't care about us. They just don't. And this big bad bill or whatever, this big bad or big ugly, is one of the most naked efforts that they've succeeded in, again, taking money out of community for health, safety, education, any of our social safety net, and pulling it into the wealthiest among us, and still managing to not balance budgets because they're allocating other dollars into this extreme enforcement measure around the ICE build out. Before we got on this call, I was like, isn't it like something like 4 times, 5 times, 8 times? And Dan reminded me it's 20 times. It is expanding the ICE budget by 20 times. I don't even think we can fathom the imagination of what that means. They can buy all kinds of weapons. They can buy all kinds of, I don't know, like the
hiring people. There's more money
and then
for
more
hiring and retention.
And then, and then we're more stuck to it. Like when I think about the states that we've been really care about building reflective democracy and helping elect Democrats who care about more people, like Arizona and Texas, like that increase of jobs suddenly becomes so much more difficult to figure out how do we replace these jobs with other things that are useful for the community. So all that comes to mind, but I've been thinking about Dan's kind of opening talking about the data here, where it's like I just want to remind people the first slide that Dan put up, which I'll repeat again, showed where for Republicans, independents, and Democrats, because the right-wing media ecosystem was hammering the story of immigration, it created this giant slippery slope that everybody slid on, where suddenly we were all paying attention to that issue. But let's remember why it was that issue, that people are feeling very scared about their futures. People are not feeling like there is a safety net, that there is confidence in the workplace, that there are just name sort of like what would make you feel like your life is okay right now? Like, do you have savings? Do you have a plan for your kids' college? Do you have a plan for if you get, knock on wood, if lightning strikes and you have a problem with your home or your health? Like, do you have a safety net? The answer is hell no, I don't, right? Across the board, people are feeling that way. And so we said, like, this is why Dan wanted to share the other ad, because it's like, people need to understand why we feel this way. The status quo is not working. And the Republicans said, you know why you feel this way? Because immigrants are stealing our resources, your job, your whatever. And they don't even share American values. They're eating things that we find abhorrent. I'm not even going to repeat the fake things, right? But it's like they stirred up this, they conjured up a boogeyman to explain why people are feeling bad. And we couldn't, we like the specific Way to Win attempted to do, actually, let's talk about the oligarchs that have taken $80 trillion out of the economy over the past 50 years. And like, maybe think about taxing some folks, like we tried to do that. But the royal we did not catch it soon enough. And so I just wanted to remind people why. And then it gets into your answer. And I know I did it in a lot more words than 3 words. But it's like, so then we're stuck in this, like, we should have come out of November saying, I'm about to curse, but it's okay. Just like, fuck all of y'all. yeah, we lost, but it doesn't mean we're wrong. It means like we have to keep charging ahead. We are not wrong about caring for a big, beautiful, multiracial democracy in this country. We are not wrong for caring about the history of the Tuskegee Airmen. We're not wrong for, I'm just trying to think of like all the things that people think are woke. And it's just like, goddamn fucking history, guys. We're not wrong for wanting to tell the truth.
For fundamentally believing that diversity is a strength and
Right.
not a weakness.
We are not wrong. And so we spent 2 goddamn quarters being like afraid of our own shadows. And I mean the royal we now. Like Democrats are like, ooh,
The
that's
family.
ooh,
Yeah.
that's too whatever. Ooh, I can't touch that. Instead of just being like, how do we say no to all of these people that want to totally take a fake mandate and completely change the fabric of our country? Like, everybody knows this because if they listen to this, they've heard me say it a million times now. My family's from South Texas. There was a time when the border was a bridge. There was a time when the border stopped at the border. And like, fast forward since the 90s, which started the first like real funding to really increase border security. And now there are checkpoints everywhere from the actual border to 90 miles up in Falfurrias. And then I remember when there was the Falfurrias checkpoints and it was like a guy and a dog in like a little hut. And now it's like an 8-lane pass with like cameras and and like you are going through another border security zone up like 90 miles up from the border. Okay, 20 times the amount of resource that. Like, where's the next checkpoint going to be? Like Dallas, Oklahoma City,
But
Chicago?
on the other hand, Tori, you can't buy drugs in this country anymore. They completely cut off the flow of drugs. It totally worked.
Right.
There's no drugs anymore.
There's no drugs.
In the
We have no
US.
drugs.
You can't buy cocaine here anymore. You know?
Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can try to synthesize some of this into a lesson or a learning or whatever from last cycle that I hope that Democrats can internalize moving forward, which is Democrats have to learn to run at the guns. We cannot run away from the guns, right? They were, maybe guns isn't a great analogy because,
wait.
But
you know what this is from. This is like my thing, right?
Oh yeah, no, I do know. I do hear you.
It's a Newt Gingrich quote. Yeah. Okay,
oh, it's a Newt Gingrich. Well,
no, it's great, but it's good.
But yeah, I love Newt. No, I'm just kidding. So, but anyway, little heart sign. No, but I like we have to run towards. I mean, this is kind of you in the back of my mind, right? We have to run towards the guns, right? And what we did on immigration and this whole thing, starting with what Dan laid out at the beginning with that chart, that graph, is Democrats said, "Oh my gosh," and ran away from the guns and ceded all the ground. And when, we've had on this podcast now people, some people are like, well, you guys are a bunch of progressive lefties. Well, we've had Dan Pfeiffer on here and he had a whole rant about learned helplessness on immigration by Democrats. And when I asked him for his 3 words, he said, oh yeah, right. This is Newt Gingrich. On the battlefield of ideas, winning requires moving toward the sound of the guns, right? Run at the guns.
Just wanted to have Newt up there.
There's nothing like Newt on our podcast.
Unless you're Ted Cruz and you run to Cancun.
It feels right. Unless you're Ted Cruz and you run away.
No,
but
he's really in Greece right now.
Wait.
Sorry,
let me get back.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me get back to Dan Pfeiffer. Dan Pfeiffer said, he was disgusted at Democrats' learned helplessness, which is his quote on immigration, and said, when I asked him for his 3 words of a learning about 2024, it was be on offense. That was, he said, be not just immigration, but overall on everything, be on offense. Then we had Molly Murphy on here of Impact Research, right? Again, not necessarily like the lefty side of the spectrum, just a, respected pollster in Washington, D.C. And we asked her what her biggest takeaway was from an immigration poll that we did with, that Impact Research we partnered with them on. They conducted the poll. We helped write the poll itself. And she said, if that you have to talk about immigration, otherwise your opposition defines you in your absence. I mean, that was essentially what she said. It's not perfect regurgitation, but this theme just comes up over and over again. And I'm sure that Dan has stuff to add in here, but I feel like as I'm listening to you, both of you, this is what it's bringing me back towards.
Yeah, like we don't have to. I guess there's this article that I was passing around last night on the team, and it's very not suitable for work. But it's from The Cut, and it's about the T-shirts on the Jersey Shore. The summer T-shirts is very not suitable for work. These shirts are very crass, but there's a category of T-shirts that are very popular on the Jersey Shore that are very macho, like very men are men kind of T-shirts. And I remember like one of the things post cycle was this like, oh God, we got to like, to get the men back, we have to be like outdo the dudes or something. And then it was very in vogue to be anti women women leadership for a minute. And I'm thinking about what you're saying, Karen. It's like, I don't think you out macho the machismo by being a jerk. You out macho the machismo by standing for something and leading. Like, isn't that what's like, when we think of what makes a good dad, or a good mom, or a parent figure, a good parent figure, it's not just the doling out of spankings the way that Tucker Carlson would talk about it. It's the like having ideas and solutions and bringing your family along and like being ready with like making sure everybody's fed and put to bed. Like it's the leadership quality. And so I don't know, just thinking about Dan Pfeiffer and those and and everything he's been saying since the election, not just on our podcast, but of course on his own his own thought leadership. And it's about just showing up and doing for people.
So what now are the barriers to this? And I mean, I'm going to throw something out that I was thinking about just this week. We as a team, I have this ongoing joke that I think like our Zoom calls would make pretty good podcast content, right? Like sometimes we just have really good conversations. This is almost from that. I would like to know, and maybe someone listening will know and connect us to these people. I would like to know what Sherrod Brown and John Tester and maybe Bob Casey think about immigration now, like as candidates, as humans, even forget as candidates, right? Like they ran these campaigns that ran these ads that were anti-immigrant. Like, is that what they really believed? Like, is that, or were they doing it because they were scared of the response or like what was going on? I just think it'd be interesting. And maybe we can have one of them on. That would be an amazing content. But I'm wondering now what both of you see all as, I feel like I'm the host a little bit, like what both of you all see as like the barriers to moving immigrants. Like how was like, like I just started reading Inverting the Pyramid a little bit. My kid had a copy, which is about how soccer tactics totally changed. And I haven't read it yet because I don't know, like I'm curious what it says. But like apparently it's all about how ideas change through organizations and like how competitive environments change things. And I just like, I don't know what, like now that this bill passed, I think we're in a little bit of an open seat, like an open, like not a persuasion window so much, but as like a strategic window, right? Of like, what do we do now? How are we going to persuade more people? And like, what are the barriers to that? And the first thing that comes to my mind is that Democrats really do seem legitimately more interested in having a fight about Zoran Mandami than about the $100 billion that just expanded this, secret police force and roving gangs of thugs. And I don't want to overestimate that because I think I feel like the magnitude of his win at some point is like going to focus the mind of people like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, and that is going to sort of evolve out. I don't want that to be a big fight, right? Like I think it's tempting for it to be a fight, but I think we do need to focus on that. But I just don't know what the other barriers are and what we need to do.
I mean, do you have a specific answer to the barriers question? Because I I have something that's maybe tangentially related, but like about why we're here doing this podcast on this topic.
I think that the barrier, I mean, I think that there are very specific power barriers. I think there are generational barriers. I think there's funding barriers, like the way funding flows. Um, I've read Abundance. There's actually this really great section in Abundance that talks about the barriers of that this one science. There's this one profile piece they do on a scientist who had this great idea about using a new kind of way to build vaccines, and no one listened to her, and everybody thought it was too weird. And Ezra and the authors of Abundance both say, it's probably some gender stuff in there. People didn't want to hear this young woman's big idea because they just couldn't see her as being like the next breakthrough scientist. But she persisted, and time shifted, and then people could hear it. And guess what? It's what led to the fast track on our vaccines after COVID. And like, it's just kind of a reminder. It's actually a great story in the book. It's one of the few stories that I love, because I really identified with the young woman scientist who's like, maybe we look a little different from some of the other Beltway folks, or maybe we sound a little different, or maybe we have different backgrounds and experiences that aren't quite the traditional path out to how you get to democratic leadership. But we're on to something. And yeah, like we're on to something. So I think if we allow more experimentation in the party too, which feels like where I'm heading with this, I think it would be a good thing. Like, more is more, actually, at this point.
One big picture barrier that I think applies to, what you're talking about, the funding barrier, the generational barrier, it's just a barrier to learning new things. This resistance to learning new things because we've always been doing it. And I'm just going to say this, we are in a time of historic change right now. And there is no world in which you're living through a time of historic change and you can do the same old things and have them work. It never works like that. So, I feel like a lot of people in the Democratic Party and, leaders, many in leadership right now, not all, but, are sort of averse to learning new things, or they're so used to how the things used to work, they just want to stick with that by habit, because that is a fundamental sort of human thing, is that we get used to things and we want them to just stay the same because it's easier and we know how to work, manipulate that system or work that system, whatever. So, but one of the reasons that I wanted to do this topic, which is particularly grim, is that the amount of money that they're gonna funnel into this, and Garrett Graff, who's really a national security expert. Dan, do you remember the name of his Doomsday Scenario? Isn't that his Substack?
Doomsday Scenario is his new publication.
His Substack, yeah.
The name of the article, I want to say, was "Giving this amount of money to ICE is a terrible something."
Yeah,
adjectives idea.
Well, I won't go into everything he went into, but when you're reading and it's a completely readable article, it's, it only takes a few minutes to read. But what becomes really clear really quickly is there's no way to staff up a law enforcement agency with this much money at a quick pace, which of course is driven by the political spectacle that that Trump and the MAGA Republicans want to create, right? Without just tons of corruption, shoddy policing, and, it really just terrible situation, not to mention that, the federal forces now decided that they have to be masked all the time. So, there is, based on what Republicans are about to do with this much money and what it's going to develop into, there will be a persuasion window that Democrats better be ready for. We better not be so consumed by ideological sniping and generational sniping and all sorts of stuff that we don't prepare for how to clue people in to what's happening, to the fear and division and scarcity mindset that they are creating with this bill, that they have created with this bill, not just because of the police force, the law enforcement that we were talking about, the deluge of money into that, but also because of the scarcity that they're creating with taking resources away from people, making them poorer, making them more desperate, whatever. They are seeding the exact ground that they want to be playing on all the time, which is fear and desperation. And Democrats better be ready to call them out for that on multiple levels, on the economic level, on the national security level, on the law enforcement, immigration level, all of it. So anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah, no, and like I kind of wanted, like, on that sort of, and this point about like how, what it's going to take for Democrats. As you were talking, I was thinking about like how one of the struggles I feel like is sort of like group chat democracy right now, right? Is like just like Kerry, when you were talking about, they're just going to have to think differently about things and get used to new ideas. And Tori's story about, God, I love, like, man, if it so comes to pass that we had the mRNA vaccine of dealing with immigration, and that catches on and becomes sort of like, and we actually are able to evolve, that'll be an amazing story. That means Tori and Jennifer and like all of us were like that team, right? And it's, you can all, I don't want to think about hopeful scenarios for how this all plays out yet. We're not there yet. But like getting Democrats to think different ways, one of our, you know, another organization in the Democratic family who we work with, who does research, recently put out a report saying, don't talk about authoritarianism. It was based on one poll question. They said, what's more important to you right now, prices or authoritarianism? And they said, people said prices. This is not a good way to do public science, public opinion research. Please do not do this if you're like listening. Some of this just does come down to, and we know the problem is that result, oh, don't talk about authoritarianism, that's going to get sent around the group chat, right? And I don't know, I mean, we have a lot of listeners in DC who are as frustrated with this as we are. I don't know how to get people to find that within themselves to really ask these questions. I don't know how to inspire them, right? Like sometimes I feel like we're a little coachy sometimes, right? We're a little Ted Lasso here, right? Soccer keeps coming up. I don't know. We want to encourage you. If you're a Democrat, encourage you to think through, really think about these things. Don't go with just what you've always done. Like that's not working. Like we have, one of these times Tom Biner has some research recently about the decline in people registering as Democrats, right? And the voter registration issues that we've had that started us down a lot in 2024. And we know a lot of that is because people don't know what the Democrats stand for. There's this whole, I mean, the brand, we found out recently, we have a poll coming out too, that the brand position is still not in horrible shape, that people who are paying attention still understand what Democrats are supposed to be for. We're not doomed, but like there's a real problem with it right now. And that when we're out there, doing negative things, and like people in DC, we have to face these questions head on. We have to address this with Americans out there. And it's not just about listening to them. It's about us communicating, what we're for and what we're actually about. We had one job, which is to keep all the rich from taking all the money. And we didn't do that. And like, we have to like reckon with that and tell people a story about what's going on.
I want to touch on that bit that Dan just said about we have some new data coming out. And one of the big surprises was that the word Democrat as a brand isn't as tarnished as we think it is. I think it's just this reminder of a couple of weeks ago, and I won't name names, I was in DC and I met with a journalist. And the journalist told me that he on a regular basis has had access to both the Republican presidential candidate and the Democratic presidential candidate since the Obama years. And that in his point of view, like when he goes to meet with a Democrat running for president, it feels like walking into a major law firm. It feels like you schedule with an assistant. You have a TikTok sent, you have a time slot sent to you. You go to a place that looks fancy. You meet them there. They have like talking points. They move on. You move on. And he was saying, like, anytime he's met with a Republican candidate for president recently, it feels like rolling with cowboys. I was like, I don't know that you know what it means to roll with cowboys, but I'll take it for a minute, where it's just like,
it's a metaphor, right?
yeah, like you just get in a truck and you're just like talking to a dude, and there's suddenly you're in text access to these guys, and you really don't think you should be in text access to them, but you are. And there's just something a little, I mean, we get that, right? Now we know that they're always texting each other.
Now we know that half the time they're drunk texting.
Yeah, exactly.
War plans. I mean, whatever.
But his point was, the cowboys feel like they understand they can make their own weather. And the Democrats feel, and this is what he said, and the Democrats feel like they are subject to weather. And we were surprised when we saw some of our data that said Democrats' brand isn't tarnished. And it was a reminder to me, or this is a reminder to us, like, just because that's what the headline says in the New York Times, or just because that's what, the latest set of pundits on their podcasts are like promoting, like, why are Democrats so fill in the blank, like, doesn't mean it's true or static, right? Like, that is weather they are creating because it's got energy right now and eyeballs are going to it. But it doesn't mean that we cannot figure out how to say, you know what, F off. Like, we're the ones. I mean, I was proud of, I know this is like not, I was proud of Hakeem Jeffries when he spoke for 8 hours to force the Republicans to take that vote in broad daylight. Like, that's our party, man. Like,
that was good.
I don't love everything he does. That's cool. But he like forced them to make that vote happen in broad daylight by standing up and talking for 8 hours. Like, that's my party. That's my party. Do I love everything they do? No, but we are going to force these people to take these votes in daylight. And like, why can't we own that shit and just be proud of our people instead of this internal bickering? Like, just remember, we can own the weather too.
I mean, we can like what Hakeem Jeffries did on the floor, and also like the weather that AOC and Bernie Sanders are creating with the anti-oligarchy tour, right? Yeah. We can like that. The point isn't we just need one, we just need, everybody needs to be rowing in the exact same direction or whatever. But what we do need is people to be fighting. And and that's what our polling has showed over and over and over again, from the immigration polling that we did to the new poll that's coming out to, I mean, as far back as I can remember from post-election, people are the voters who either skipped or sort of Democratic defectors, they want fighters. They want fighters. And so, if you're fighting for something that is, a core value, that is values driven, then, that's a worthwhile endeavor. Now, we can get more specific about what those fights are down the line, but there's a piece of me that's like, damn it, right now, just pick a fight. Pick the fight and go at it. What's your fight? Dan's like, no, that's a terrible idea.
I don't know. It just scares me.
Right? Dan,
it's
like,
the guns. We're gonna kitchen table harder, right? We just have to all up our game, right? And like, I just hope that with Mamdani's win, that I saw this earlier today that Jeffries and Schumer are going to meet with him, and he's a persuasive dude. I mean, God, you can watch 15 seconds of him on the internet and be charmed by him, right? And I just hope that they get that the coalition is AOC to Liz Cheney still, right? It's in there. And we got to get that whole thing working together. And it's we're Tory keeps working on me to get less factional, is what one of my insider pals calls it too, right? And I will be not factional in this moment if the other people will not be factional, as long as we all commit to upping our game. Right?
Oh,
like
that's true too.
Yeah.
Like
You know.
I've had the same mirror put on me where it's like, Tori, why do you keep falling into these factional camps? We need everybody. And I'm like, well, I'll put down my arms when they put down their arms. They're the ones coming at me.
And they're also all the
But
power to make all
I
decisions.
feel that.
You know?
I feel that deeply. And I also feel deeply that like my true enemy is not, Alyssa Slotkin. My true enemy is Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, right.
Like, my true enemy is Stephen Miller. Like, that guy gets to decide how to use 20 times the budget? Are we serious?
Yeah.
That's
And
the direction.
we want more clarity from the people who are INGC who are making these decisions, that they agree with what you just said, right? That would be great to get more. And I think if we had them on the show, we put that question to them, they would say yes, right? But I think that needs to be reflected, of course.
Well, I tell you what, though, to some extent, we can try to create our own weather too. I mean, the more traction we get for our ideas, and the more they work on the campaign trail and whatever, then the more they're eventually going to have to sort of, like they are meeting with Mamdani because he created his own weather. That's why they're meeting with him. They're not meeting with him because they want to. They're meeting with him because they cannot ignore the fact that he more or less reassembled the coalition that we lost in 2024 and that we need to have moving forward. It wasn't exactly, but it's close.
We should up for folks. I have never seen a campaign deliver so quickly post election day like a white paper as to why, the way that Mamdani did. He did a video that described where he campaigned, who turned out, why. Like it was a great video, Dan.
Okay.
And he juxtaposed it by like, this is what Trump did. Like, these are the Trump numbers in this very part of the city. These were my numbers. Let me tell you how I talked to them. I hate to call it a postmortem because his Mamdani, I don't know what to call it other than a white paper.
Victory, right?
Yeah.
After action review is what the military calls it, right? So.
Yeah. And he went straight in. It's 2 minutes long. I walked away being like, I think I learned more about the inside strategy of this campaign than I have from the Harris campaign. But I guess I'm just sharing, like, he reassembled a coalition that we see as eroding over the course. Like, what does Catalyst have it at? Or Terrence was sharing with us the last time from Hit Strategies. Like, what is it, like 2 decades of losing people steadily over time? And this guy brings them back because he goes and listens, and he's being very simple. Was it like housing, transit, and education, or housing, health, and education? Yeah. Right? Like, he's just like, let's just focus on these core things. So in some ways, Dan, I get it. Like, housing, transportation, that sounds like, let's just kitchen table everyone. But it's in the context of like, life is hard. Let's fix it together. These other guys are going to come at me. You know why it's hard? Because they've been taken from you, and they're going to come at me. So when they do get my back, and Mamdani is just excellent at it. He's excellent.
Yeah. And he went straight at Trump's strengths, right? He was like, well, this is where Trump did well. I'm going to go.
Some of the terrain a little bit. I just like, I do not want to I mean, there were 2 benefits that Mamdani had. It was that Cuomo was limited in the kinds of attacks. He couldn't attack on immigration because it's New York City. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous, and he couldn't really attack on transit.
Yeah, but wait, can I just say, hold on.
Sure, but I don't want to overgeneralize from Mamdani's winning.
Well, no, but Trump went straight at Mamdani on immigration, and he didn't take the bait. After he won, he said, well, we might have to really, revoke his citizenship and deport him. Did you hear her response?
No. I get that, but I'm just saying that of the attack surfaces on Mamdani, they're going to work. It's going to work differently in Ohio or whatever, right? And there was Cuomo never went after him, and
we all get. I mean, New York is just a unique. It's Gotham City. It's got its own TikTok. It's got its own rhythm and beat, and we know it's different from like congressional district in South Texas or Arizona. But there are some fun like basics here I think that Kerry's trying to get at, which is like be a fighter, pick a fight, name the stakes. If you name the hero and the villain, when the villain comes at you, then this is what I think so strong about Trump. He is very clear about heroes and villains. And when the villain comes at him, it's one of the ways that he's able to say, I told you they'd come for me.
Yeah.
And like Mondami's got a little bit of that. Like when Trump comes at him, he'll say, I told you he was going to come for me. Look, he's doing it.
I will say there's one thing that I feel super, we should test that. I guess we'll test it. I don't know if we even need to test this. The message that was not the first thing. If you look at Zoran's website, it was about prices. The second thing on there is now my Blue Sky profile picture. This campaign is for every person who believes in the dignity of their neighbors. And that the government's job is to actually make lives better, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting emotional over it, right? But like that is going to work in Ohio. That is going to work in Nebraska. If it's Dan Osborne or a Democrat or whatever, that's what the Democratic Party is supposed to be about. And if we talk about that rather than middle-class tax cuts and our immigration fears, we're gonna turn this around.
Yeah, and I will say that we did put up a whole Substack on, Jennifer wrote a whole Substack on learnings that you can take away from Mondani's win that aren't just simply about, messaging and whatever, but also how he deployed it and learnings that can apply basically anywhere across the country, right? So there are learnings that apply, even though New York is certainly a different cup of tea. There are learnings you can take away. I don't know. I think I had, let's see, there was one last thing. I want to be clear. I want to make sure to say this, that in our most recent polling, two messages that resonated really well with voters was Trump on immigration and his enforcement efforts. Trump and Republicans' actions raise bigger concerns about citizens' rights in this country. By arresting people without proof of crime, deporting people who are here legally, and ignoring the courts when they tell him to stop, Trump is saying that no one is safe if he wants to come after them. That was particularly resonant. One more was Trump is ignoring courts and arresting judges, and Republicans have failed to provide any check on his authoritarian power grab. They are creating a constitutional crisis that threatens to completely undermine our democracy. So I just wanted to make sure, like, we had actual messages in that immigration poll that resonated really well with people. And let's see, there was one last possible thought. Oh, I know. Okay. Here's one last question to try to wrap this up on. When I think about the enormity of this bill, and not just the deportation force and the mass, federal force and all that stuff, but like the systemic impacts of it in terms of the country's resilience in the next economic crisis, like a depression or a global pandemic, combined with what we talked about, the, sort of the fear and desperation that it stokes. So when I think about the economic impact, the systemic impact, the law enforcement impact, all of this, right? And on both a personal and a systemic level, Republicans campaigned for years on ripping out the ACA root and branch, right? They spent a decade campaigning on that, and they won several cycles on that. And I have to wonder if a similar rallying cry about overturning this law could be a starting point for Democrats to sort of align on, right? We're talking about all this internal sniping and whatever. If you just go out and say, look, we're going to repeal this law, or we're going to undo every piece of this law that we can. You got to go out, make the law incredibly unpopular. It's already, it's already tests very poorly, but more people need to know about it. But then you campaign on, you create your own weather, right? You make sure everybody knows how dreadful it is and what kind of impact it can have on us. And then you go out and you campaign on, we're going to, we may not agree on everything. Democrats, we're a big coalition, but we are going to kneecap this law as much as we can as soon as we have the power to do it. Is that a good starting point, or am I like off base?
My hunch says I don't know. Maybe parts of it, right? Like, and there's, the thing that I just read about, like, there's so much on defending government that we need to turn around that, like, I don't know that, like, just running on this thing that supposedly was about making government smaller, like, we just have a lot of work to do. And, like, I think maybe, like, the
This
immigration
wasn't
stuff might be so intense that we could just run on that, focused on that, right? And, like,
Which
it's
part was
like
so intense? I
fewer
missed.
roving gangs of thugs, like, maybe that's the message. But I think this is a huge question, and I don't think we can do it in a minute or two or whatever we're gonna, like.
I'm
I
not
think
sure.
there's still something about the four. Like, what are you for, and what is the alternative? I mean,
Right,
this is
right.
why. This is why, and I'm sorry that I'm keep talking about abundance, but this is why abundance has had such a
Oh, it's filled.
long-term impact on the consciousness of Democrats this year, which is it is attempting to articulate what government should be doing instead of what it is currently doing. And it is the one it's like the only source of information right now that we have to think about what comes next. Like the conversations that I had in the first part of the year with people who are very, very bright, part of our family, part of our big Democratic family, really respect them, was, there's going to be a core of us, Tory, that start thinking not about how do we win the next election. It's going to be thinking about how we govern in the future. That there's going to be this like what is the next that we're moving towards? And if we can't articulate that, then I don't. What I've learned from COVID is that there's a pretty high threshold for pain. Americans have a pretty high threshold for pain if they think it's the only solution. Like we will sacrifice people's health if it means reopening our businesses, because that's what we've got right now. That's like our only income source right now. Like that kind of mentality. So my fear is like we'll get real accustomed. It's real. I've seen it. You get real accustomed to just more and more masked thugs on the street. You can naturalize it or normalize it if you think that's the only thing that's going to help you get through this phase of the American economy. So we better have solutions. And I think that's why the pressure's so high on Democratic governors right now that have the power of the purse to actually show what it means to govern. It's a high stakes moment.
I wanted to push back on Tori, but she may have been too persuasive. I mean, what I was what I was going to say was no. I mean, I think you're right. And what I was going to say was I was thinking about ripping out, kneecapping this. It may be a fool's errand, but kneecapping this law as a starting point and not an end point. In other words, like
Yeah.
you start by saying, here's what the government shouldn't be doing. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
punishing poor people. It shouldn't be taking services away from people who need it. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
arresting people with secret police force. It shouldn't be doing that. But
Yeah.
then you go a step further. Like it's kind of like a 2026, whatever. You demonize Republicans for coming up with this gargantuan monstrosity, and then you talk, and then in 2020 by 2028 you've got to start having people come up with, and here's what we stand for, here's what I would do if I were elected, etc. Like,
I
I
think
don't
you're
know.
right. I still think it's right in the sense that like I will admit that this morning of all mornings, like looking at the headlines from Texas, looking at these, like I have had a pit in my stomach all day long. And like Dan's been on the verge of being emotional. And I have to be honest too. Like I'm on the verge of being emotional too. Like this is such a big task in front of us that the only thing we can do is try to take one scoop at a time. Just like try one step at a time. Like just and so Kerry, I think that the offering you're making about using this as a flexion point and just starting from somewhere so that we can rally Democrats around like this next step, I think it makes a lot of sense. And we've got these bigger problems we have to deal with at the same time.
Yeah, I think I might be persuaded, Kerry. Restore the Medicaid cuts and rip out the ridiculous increases in ICE. It's a pretty good starting point, you know. Will Dems run on that? I don't know. Some people will. Abgazala probably will.
I'll get on the hotline to Jeffries and make my pitch. Just kidding. He's definitely not taking my calls.
We would love to be talking to them, you know, and like,
that's right.
You know, yeah.
If Hakeem Jeffries wants to come on here and talk about and, you know, talk about what he wants to do, we'd love to have him. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm more than happy to extend that interview, but offer. But I just have a feeling it might not take us up on it. Maybe not. But one day, here's the thing. Okay, so I'm going to tie this into the outro, which is my as a reporter, what I always learned about trying to get the big interviews with the Democrats, the high level Democrats, like Tory was talking about earlier, that, you know, get in and actually is that you keep approaching them until they decide that they need you. Okay. That's how I did it when I was a reporter for The Advocate. If you're a reporter for the New York Times, then they always are deciding they need you. But as a reporter for The Advocate on LGBTQ issues, they didn't want to talk to me most of the time until they knew that they needed me because something was on the line with our constituency. Right. So, but if we prove, I want all of our listeners to go out. If you appreciate what we are bringing to the table in terms of messaging and research and intelligence and new thinking, fresh thinking, whatever, go out and recruit someone to listen to us, because the bigger we get, the more people who listen to us, right, and think that we are bringing something interesting and important to the conversation that is sorely needed, then then over time, in 2 to 3 years, maybe Hakeem Jeffries needs to come on our show and talk to us about what he's doing, because he needs us, right? Or he needs the platform. That's what win
without coming on Charting the Way Forward.
Right, exactly. I can't win without coming and talking to the constituency of people who listen to this. I mean, that is, you know, if I'm going to put sort of a big picture goal out there for Charting the Way Forward, that would be it. To gain that type of listenership and whatever. So I want to thank Tory and Dan for a candid and free-flowing conversation that I hope, you know, on a grim topic that I hope was illuminating and hopeful, and sometimes, you know, with a pit in our stomach, because that's where we are in this country, and sometimes specifically where we sit in Texas for Tory in particular. And I want to thank you for joining us, our listeners. So go out, recruit someone to listen to us. We would love that. We would love to have more listenership. But we also love the people who came, right? It doesn't have to be everyone. It has to be the people who are you know, out there fighting for things, getting involved and whatever. That's the most important audience. And that's who you are, our listeners. You know, you make us relevant. Our listeners make us relevant. And with that, we will see you next Thursday. And listen, next Thursday might be a doozy. We might be able to release some of this polling that we've been talking about, that we've been teasing in this show. So until then, do good, be well, hug your loved ones, and please tell your dog I say hi.
Ladies and gentlemen, leaders and fighters for freedom and liberty and the American dream, the best is yet to come.